welcome to Field of Broken Dreams. This podcast is a multi-part, conversational, and observational loose feature story looking into the underserved environment of the minor league baseball system. Each episode will include introspective deep dives into some of the various shortcomings and hardships within the MILB, as well as some great interviews with some of baseball media's best and brightest minds. My name is Ben Harris, and in this first episode, I'll be discussing some of the day-to-day challenges for the average minor leaguer, such as housing and travel provisions, as well as player mental and physical health and safety. You'll also hear a great conversation I was able to have with former Sports Illustrated and Baseball America editor and publisher B.J. Schechter. But without further ado, let me get in the batter's box. For years upon years, generations of minor league ball players were put into terrible housing situations due to lack of team compensation. In fact, this very season going on right now in 2022, has been the very first season where MLB major clubs were required to provide housing for their players. Now, this is not to say that it's the best housing, because there's certainly tons of adjustments and specifics within the policies that could improve, but it's progress nonetheless, because for years upon years, players were staying in terrible living situations, whether it be leasing a 2-bedroom apartment and shoving 3 to 6 or more players into that kind of situation, or staying with host families. In fact, 50% of all minor league players were staying with host families before this previous season in I believe the AA ranks, which is crazy to have these communities be the ones sheltering your players when you're owned by billionaires, the richest people who can possibly be around, and they weren't willing to provide any type of housing. Not only were players being crammed into small apartments with too many people, but they had to set up their own leases and rental agreements. Many players, instead of finding any permanent kind of solution, anytime they were in their home city, were just renting Airbnbs or hotel rooms together, not having any kind of permanent living situation. And it was prevalent because there's tons of stories of guys who had lease agreements and rent agreements, and then they were either traded or called up and then sent back down or sent somewhere else, but they're still responsible for their lease. It's not like any landlords are like, oh, yes, the minor league baseball trade exception. No, you're still on the hook. So it was causing these players to be in just suffering situations. So luckily, after a ton of pressure was mounted by organizations like the Advocates for Minor Leaguers, the owners were able to last September approve policy where teams are now required to provide housing for all their players. It includes apartments, rental homes. Host families are still allowed, but families have to pass background checks, and there can only be so many players in a certain space. Players are still not paid during spring training yet. Now, the housing options have to be provided, whether it be dorms or hotel rooms. But there's still, like I said a little bit earlier, improvements to be made in these situations. The new rules still have these flaws. They're not guaranteeing every player the privacy of their own bedroom. They're not very accommodating rules to players who are married or have families or have children, and still having to use local host families or hotel rooms in place of a real permanent living situation is pretty inexcusable. I get that there's progress being made, and even before the rules were changed, some teams were being generous and giving their players housing stipends, but nonetheless, there's still work to be done, even with rules being changed to have players get housing provided by their teams. Welcome back to Field of Broken Dreams. I'm now here with BJ Schechter, who is currently the VP of Media and Marketing at Three Step Sports. He is one of my professors here at Seton Hall, and he's a former editor at Sports Illustrated and Baseball America. Now, BJ, my first question is kind of more personal than anything, because right off the bat, I kind of want to discover how the game reflects upon every individual differently. But that being said, what does minor league baseball mean and represent to you on a personal note?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. First of all, Ben, I think, minor league baseball, even more than major league baseball, it really is Americana. It's apple pie and ice cream. It's family. It's entertainment. It's a fun experience where you can just forget about life for a little while. And the one thing that makes minor league baseball so unique is they really focus on that family experience. And so you'll see all sorts of wacky promotions and races and getting the kids involved. And it's a very intimate experience, at all levels of minor league baseball, from single A to triple A, where you really feel like you're part of a community. It's the really family businesses. And the great thing about minor league baseball is, not only are you apt to see players rehabbing from the major leagues, which is always exciting when a star does a rehab assignment, but more importantly, you're seeing the future stars. I remember watching Wander Franco, who's now with the Rays, come all the way up through single A. And when I was at Baseball America, 3 years in a row, from the time he was 17 years old, all the way up until he got called up to the Rays a little over a year ago, and stayed there permanently, and now is a fixture in their lineup. He was our top prospect at BA, number one prospect, and he was in single A. And then, obviously advanced to double A and then triple A, and then finally with the major league team. So you're going to see some, some great players. You look at the Blue Jays, who have a terrific young core, led by Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette, both sons of major league stars, and Dante Bichette and Vlad Sr., of course. They played for the Manchester Fisher Cats, which are the Blue Jays double-A affiliate in Manchester, New Hampshire. So tiny Manchester, New Hampshire. There's a hotel right behind the stadium. I mean, literally almost like Camden Yards, right behind the stadium. And
I was at Camden yesterday, by the way. I went and caught Orioles.
Get out of here. I was there Saturday night.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. It was my first time there. I had never been.
Yeah, it's a great it's a great old park, and it's hard to believe that Camden Yards is 30 years old. But like Camden Yards, which has that warehouse in the outfield, in right field, there's a hotel behind the right field and center field fence, in Manchester, New Hampshire, and Vlad Jr. hit many a bomb and hit the hotel. So you get to see these great things, and these kids develop. Bobby Witt Jr., who's now up in the majors, went all the way through the Royals system. So you're seeing future stars before your eyes, but you're really seeing baseball and entertainment at its purest level.
Not only that, but you also see these minor league organizations really take heed and pride in their development of guys that they're able to send to the bigs. I know in Daytona, they have like a big wall with plaques of every player that they've had in their system that's ended up getting to the show. And I'm sure tons of other teams have memorials or like little iconography for players that have been able to make it through their system. Now, what would you kind of say? Obviously, minor league baseball has a special place for the general public, the fans, the media. But from kind of a business standpoint, what do you think minor league baseball currently represents to Major League Baseball?
It's a good deal, because when you look at the business of minor league baseball from an ownership standpoint and my former boss at Baseball America owned 3 minor league teams, one at each level: single A, double A, triple A. It's a tough business. It's really tough to make a lot of money. It's not like Major League Baseball teams or any other pro sport teams when you see those valuations just going up into the billions. It's really, in a lot of ways, a break-even business, and the pandemic really hurt minor league baseball more than any other professional sport, because upwards of 50%, sometimes higher, depending on the team, of the revenue is through the gate. So there's not a national television deal. They're not huge endorsements like there are in Major League Baseball. So it's a tough business. And when you look at from a Major League Baseball standpoint, so if you're the Yankees, you have a Yankees hat on now, so I'm going to use the Yankees. The Yankees have this feeder system. Yes, they pay for the players. They don't have to pay for any of the operations. Most of the travel they're not paying for, per diem. All this. Most of the overhead, aside from salaries, which is no small feat, is being provided by the minor league team. Any sort of operational expenses, Major League Baseball just made minor league teams upgrade their lights, their lighting. And it may not seem like a big thing, but that's tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars that minor league teams have to come up with. So it's a feeder system, and it's a great deal for Major League Baseball, not unlike college basketball is to the NBA. College basketball is the ultimate feeder system, to the NBA, and unlike minor league baseball, the NBA is not paying for anything. But in this case, while Major League Baseball is paying for salaries, they're not paying for anything else, and so a lot of minor league teams are struggling, especially now, coming post-pandemic, where they didn't play a home game in nearly 2 years. So it's a great deal for Major League Baseball. A lot of people would like to see MLB teams, shoulder more of the financial burden, but the system we have set up right now it's a good deal for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of a lot of that power that Major League Baseball holds over that system in being able to keep it continuous, keep things flowing, are those antitrust laws. I think they play arguably the biggest and just a massive factor in limiting the power that both the minor league system and its individual players have. Do you think that competition within how baseball is systematically structured, in that, like, eliminating some of these antitrust laws and letting leagues kind of run themselves, do you think that could be a positive factor for kind of growing the minor league game? Or do you think that would actually just cause more struggles because they've been centralized for so long?
Yeah, it's antitrust is a tricky thing in pro sports, because by and large it works in most of the leagues. I don't know how much effect it would really have. You look at the independent leagues, whether it's the Atlantic League, the Northern League, Frontier League, operate on its own. And the Atlantic League has probably sent more players to the majors, both guys that were under the radar, and they're known as a second chance league. So somebody, a top prospect, a Josh Hamilton type, gets in trouble, or abuses drugs or alcohol, wherever the case may be. And the Atlantic League is great about giving players a second chance. Those, that's even more of a struggle than the affiliated minor league clubs. Major League Baseball has since kind of taken those independent leagues under their umbrella. I think really real change is getting, these major league clubs, these billionaires, um, putting it on them, to take some of the financial responsibility and burden off of these minor league owners. And if you're looking, they're benefiting, directly, from everything these minor league teams are doing. And, in many cases, they're strengthening, the relationship between the minor league team and the major league club. I mean, you look at the Yankees, and, for years they were in Trenton, they just moved to Somerset in Double A.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really big deal. And for a team like Somerset, which has got a beautiful stadium, and is doing all this marketing, for on behalf of the Yankees, and to benefit themselves. But to me, the major league club, should be more involved, not only financially, but logistically, marketing wise, sales and sponsorship wise. I think there's a lot of things that major league clubs could do, for their minor league affiliates.
Now, one of those things could probably involve some of the spring training periods for the minors. Currently, as the rules stand, players are not paid for their 1 to 2 months of spring training time. And it has caused many players to kind of consider it more strenuous than the actual season. There's added pressures to better themselves during a time where they have to be committed to the game without a monetary tie. How important to player rights issues do you think is being able to have these players be on salary during their spring training season?
I mean, it's hugely crucial. I mean, you look at, you look at after the top, just say 5%. A lot of minor league, players are, at or below minimum wage when you think about all the time that they put in. And spring training is a problem, but the bigger problem is how they're compensated throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, Double A, certainly Single A. And these players are cramped together, 3, 4, in tiny apartments. They're extremely long hours. They're traveling on buses. They're staying in crappy hotels. They're eating fast food. Many of them are young, 18 to 22, 23 years old. But the conditions, not only from a working standpoint, but a pay standpoint, there's a huge disparity. For every Vladimir Guerrero Juniors, there are thousands of players that are never going to make the major leagues, that in many cases haven't gone to college or left college early, drafted after 3 years or what have you, don't have their degrees. And so what's going to happen for 90+% of those players that are never going to sniff a big league call up? That's a problem. That's a big problem right now, because everybody is benefiting from these players, their experience, nobody more so than the major league clubs. And when you're looking at the bottom line, you're looking at their TV deals. Even if you take 2%, of these TV deals, and you put it somehow back into the minor leagues, that's progress. But how these players are compensated, how they, even their per diem, or what they're given every single day, is almost laughable. So the conditions, not only pay, but everything around the minor league system is off.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money in baseball, But as you keep going, down the levels, there's less and less for the players.
On a daily basis, those guys are like hopping at the opportunity to do player appearances for stuff like $50 gift cards that will just like be able to help them make it through the day. And I mean, these guys are in some cases being forced into poverty to pursue that dream, to kind of chase that golden carrot dangling in front of them of the big leagues. So in times like spring training, when you're completely obligated for a month and a half, 2 months, you can't hold another job like they have to for a lot of guys have most players have like part-time jobs for only 6 months of the season, but it's hard to keep holding that during that spring training time because they have so much team obligation to do. But you normal workplaces aren't going to be able to like work with that. So it's a really tough situation that, of course, as you said, really ties back to what the big leagues are able to provide. Now, one last thing, kind of in the vein of players and trying to get them their financial compensations to their liking. Every minor league player, and I think every major league player, if they're called straight up, is signing the same 7-year uniform player contract. Mm-hmm. The only real variables are kind of related to what minor league tier they're in, and that'll affect the salary in minute ways. And this is something that's kind of loathed equally by players stuck in the minors as well as big league guys who are trying to get their next big deal. How important would you say changing that first contract stipulation is in kind of a sense of both growing the game and appeasing the players?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, and it really comes down to collective bargaining. We just are coming off of a work stoppage, a lockout, in Major League Baseball, and it goes to the Major League Baseball Players Union used to be the strongest union out of any in pro sports. Major League Baseball was the first to have free agency, coming off Marvin Miller and all that. Over the years, the owners have garnered more power. And when you get yourself in a situation where the players are locked out, they're not getting paid, there are a lot of contentious things on the table, you're not going to get everything that you want. And I think the uniform contract, as you point out, is something that falls through the wayside. It's really easy. It's like, well, okay, well, comparatively speaking, is it is it worth lowering the luxury tax, or whatever it is, or certainly giving the Players Association the ability to appeal and sometimes arbitrate suspensions or contracts, or what have you. So these things, they're seemingly little things, but they have that ripple effect. Are they going to affect Aaron Judge? Not really, because whatever he's not making on uniforms, he's going to make 15 times that, with
from Adidas,
Adidas contract, right? So, but these especially minor league players, but and major league players too. You get the fourth pitcher in the bullpen. They're all right. Maybe they're making $700,000, and that's a lot of money. But then you start the agent is going to get 4 or 5%. This person has got to live in multiple places and support their family, and believe me, they're not poor, but the average major league player, just say that fourth bullpen reliever, their career is not going to be very long. There are no Tom Brady's in Major League Baseball, and even your stars are going to burn out really, really quickly. You're not having many players play into their 40s. So what are they, and these are young players, making a lot of money. That money is going to go fast. So that, you need, more ways, to make money. You need more, the lower you go, the more things you need, to sustain you. And the fact of the matter is, um, 4 out of 5 minor league players are never going to get to the big leagues. Um, so, the average career, is less than 4 years, in the minor leagues. So, there's got to be a way, to make some money while you're there. For most players, there's not. And there's a huge disparity. Uniforms, is one of them. Other, endorsements. We see what NIL has done for college sports, and that's great. That's great for these athletes. It's for some of these top, college baseball programs, your LSU's, your Mississippi States, of the world, that have huge followings. Now these players can get NIL. It will be really interesting to see, if that keeps them in college, because, in many cases, they're going to be able to make more money, with NIL, than they're going to, be able to do with any sort of endorsement deals, if they, sign and try to make it through the minor leagues.
Yeah, it makes me kind of think of like they were only a year or two off, but that Vandy team with like Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter, like what could they have been making compared to like now Leiter, I think throwing for the Rough Riders, like he would have made more money on that Vandy championship team than he's making right now in the system. So it's just wild to see. And there's so many avenues and so many things that need to be fixed. And it's an obvious problem. I mean, I'm doing a whole thesis about it. So it's out there, but there's definitely much to do. So, but BJ, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. And it was a great time. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Good luck, man.
Thank you. Arguably the biggest oversight when it comes to the evaluation of the conditions of the minor leagues is the mental toll that it takes on these players to be competing for these teams and trying to make their careers in minor league baseball. The statistics are incredibly unlikely. Even as a guy who's within the minor league system already, has been drafted, has signed a deal to a club, it is still very unlikely that you make a pro ball club. Only 10%, about 10% of guys who are in the minor leagues will play one game, not have a career, not play a few seasons, not be a journeyman going back and forth. 10% of guys in the minors will play one game in the majors. But there's still thousands of players that will go through this system every decade and never sniff the pro fields. And that's not to say every player deserves to get to the bigs. That's not true. That's just not how it works. That's not real. But by having the system where the opportunity to earn your way and grind through these layers of a tiered minor league system with tons and tons of players, it takes a mental toll. You're getting this golden carrot hung in front of you for years, and it is absolutely taxing. Not only that, but you're trying to pursue this dream while being put into poverty while trying to do it. These players are not paid a livable wage. As I talked about earlier, they, until recently, had terrible housing situations that they had to pay for. Now they're just in terrible housing situations that they don't pay for. This game at this level takes a real toll on these guys. Think of all these foreign prospects that come from the Dominican Republic, other countries. There's always that threat of, I get cut, I have to move back home to a different country. Or guys who are struggling to make ends meet, they're having to ask their parents and friends for money. There are tons of different situations that leave just a kind of God-sized hole in these guys' hearts. It's a really mentally tasking profession. And I don't even know if everybody would call it a profession because they're not being paid a livable wage. Tons and tons of guys. In fact, most minor leaguers have second and even third jobs just trying to keep up with things. There's stories upon stories of homeless minor leaguers because they're not paid enough to make a living wage. There's a mental health crisis going on in the minor leagues because of the pure anxiety that trying to provide for yourself within that system takes. They have mouths to feed, mortgages to pay, bills, but you're trying to pursue your dreams, but it's not an incredibly achievable one, especially because the circumstances are so dire and so tilted away from each player's favor. These guys don't have the nutrition programs that they need to be professional athletes. They don't necessarily have the greatest medical facilities, especially when compared to their pro clubs counterparts. So between terrible diets that they're forced to be on because of the poverty they're put into to try and pursue this dream of minor league baseball and playing in the pro game, they aren't able to really truly focus and become the superstar athlete that they might have the potential to be if they had the correct resources allocated to them. These are pro ball players and they deserve to be treated like pro ball players. It's too tasking of a game. Baseball is known as the most mentally tough game to play. Yet these players are playing professionally within terrible conditions, and it's taking a serious toll on these guys. There have been multiple stories of minor league players attempting and even committing suicide, and it's absolutely heartbreaking to hear stories like this and still see conditions be so mediocre throughout the tiers of the minors. The major league owners of these affiliates have too much money to be seeing guys in their system that play for their organization struggle on a day-to-day basis to not only make ends meet, but to be able to be their best selves on the field that they're representing your organization for. They need to be put in a better spot mentally and physically and have that safety net of just genuine resources that are going to be provided to them that should be no-brainer kind of stuff. These guys need to have a sense of stability in their lives to be able to, one, perform, and two, be the people that they want to be. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Field of Broken Dreams. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something along the way. If you'd like to learn more about the struggles and shortcomings of minor league baseball, I highly encourage you to visit advocatesforminorleaguers.com. While this is my senior capstone thesis project, none of the views or opinions on this show reflect that of Seton Hall University or other organizations represented in this episode. You can find and follow me at Ben Harris, but the R's are sevens, on Twitter and Instagram. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and go ahead and listen to the other episodes.